I've studied this issue for quite some time, and honestly, it just kind of fell in my lap up here. I believe our country, at least since 1947, has had a long history of covering this issue up. And this year we were finally able to hold a legitimate hearing in July with credible witnesses who testified under oath to what they'd seen and experienced. The hearing this year faced a lot of pushback from the intelligence community, members of Congress, and of course our friends at the Pentagon. The intelligence community shut down an amendment I tried to include in the FAA reauthorization bill, and it would just require the Federal Aviation Administration to report UAP sightings by commercial pilots to Congress. I was told by the whip that bill was killed by the intelligence community, and I corrected him and I said, "You mean the intelligence committee?" And he said, "No, the intelligence community." And as they say, when you're over the target, that's when you get the most fire. And it would just, like I said, it would just require the FAA administration to report UAP sightings by commercial pilots to Congress. Again, they spend a whole hell of a lot of time and effort and money to tell us something exists that does not exist. And so, fortunately, another amendment I introduced this year, it was to increase transparency. And honestly, this is what this whole issue is about transparency. On the issue, was included in this year's NDAA Act. It required the Department of Defense to declassify any documents and records relating to publicly known sightings of UAPs or UFOs that do not compromise the national security of the United States. It all comes down to one word, and that word is transparency. I've been briefed on things I can't talk about in public because it's considered classified. But why are we classifying so much about this, especially if the information doesn't jeopardize national security and we have departments telling us that they do not exist? We are here today to discuss that. I've got several other notes, but I'll skip over them because I know y'all probably want to hear from the folks behind me. We had some great witnesses, as I stated before, but these folks want to talk about more of the transparency and some of the pushback we're receiving from those aforementioned groups. And with that, I'll turn it over to my dear friend, Representative Luna, the mother of Henry. And if you get to see this kid, you got to see this kid. He's spectacular. Thank you all so much.
Thank you all for being here today. It is unacceptable that any mid-level unelected bureaucrat staffers can tell members of Congress that we are not allowed to access information about UAPs. Let me be clear that we are the representatives of the elected, or that of people that sent us here to do the right thing. Unelected bureaucrats do not get to say what we can and cannot see. We've had 3-star generals tell us that we did not have authorized access to this information, but yet how do you expect us to continue to send taxpayer money to fund government projects if you're not even allowing us to see what those projects are? And I say that because, as some of you know, we have been consistently hearing that we do not have the authorized clearances, again, by people not elected to office. Let me repeat this. The people's representatives, members of Congress who sit on Judiciary, Armed Services, and the Oversight Committees are being denied access to this information. But if we do not have the clearance, who does? Does this sound like a truly free country? Referencing Grush, I know there was many questions in regards to what was happening with his current IG report and whether or not we were able to receive access to that information. We were previously denied this. We have now received permission from him directly to go back into the SCIF to review that information. But in my short time in office, it has become very clear and evident that there is an apparent an orchestrated attempt to deny us this access, and it appears that that is coming from the intelligence community. We have a rampant overclassification problem. We need the UAP Disclosure Act, which I would ask that if you see to my left, you have Representative Burchett's language, and it should be added. As we know, we do not want to go forward with fake promises to the American people. I'd also like to speak on the issue that some members have stonewalled our efforts to get transparency, and this is also unacceptable. No one member is above another, and the American people deserve to know as much about the existence in this universe as possible. They certainly have a right to know about whether or not if their safety is threatened, and most especially when it comes to our men and women defending us in the skies. This is a simple answer. Stop barring us from the truth.
Good morning, good afternoon, I should say now. So I'm happy to be here. with the folks that have really been talking about this since the beginning of Congress. This is not something that I thought I would get involved in when I first came to Congress. But quite frankly, the reason why I got involved is as we started asking questions, legitimate questions, the pushback we got is what interests me. Every time we pulled a thread and we stumbled on something, it seemed that we would get stonewalled. And so, NASA has stated that the term UAP does not necessarily imply extraterrestrial origin, which means we could be making these things domestic. And so, look, if these are advanced technologies, we're not interested in hurting national security, but we are interested in knowing what these UAPs are. You have the All-Domain Anomaly Resolution Office that was in the NDAA in 2022, and they have said, so the government has said, there's 366 reports of UAPs. A number of them they will not classify. They cannot explain to us. Some they say are weather balloons, some they say is clutter, some they say are other anomalies, but then there are a bunch that they don't explain. And I think you see not just a bipartisan approach here in the House, but you see a bicameral approach with Senator Chuck Schumer and what he's trying to accomplish. And that really just is transparency and disclosure. I think the American people have a simple question, which is if none of this exists, if this is all false, why at every turn are there people trying to stop the transparency and the disclosure? Why are folks who are in charge of committees, whether they are in the House or in the Senate, opposed to this disclosure? And it's that point alone that piques the interest, right? And that's really what we're about. This is not about whether there are aliens or there are not aliens, right? Those are questions that I think remain unanswered, right? It's not whether there is stuff we have found here or not found here. Those questions remain unanswered. The problem is when we ask those questions, right, rather than being provided information that would prove it false, they stonewall the information. And that is what piques the interest. Thank you.
And we are here today because all of the whistleblowers, the hearings, the investigations, the discussions, the work that we have done have culminated in a negotiation that is happening in real time right now over the National Defense Authorization Act, a piece of legislation I care deeply about as a member of the House Armed Services Committee. And in that negotiation, we are fortunate that the amendment Congressman Burchett offered to the House version of the NDAA provides a beachhead for us to be able to get the answers and to be able to demand the transparency that is necessary. It is insufficient, though, to seek this transparency from the Department of Defense alone. We have to have cooperation so that Title 50 authorities through the intelligence community are also subject to review, that the FAA, the NSA, the FBI, even state and local authorities that have information are able to have that cataloged, assessed, and then put out before the public. It is my belief that the Burchett Amendment is the strongest position when coupled with the additional authorities and additional agencies that I've just mentioned in order to be able to get to that productive result. Unfortunately, we have members of the House Intelligence Committee and the Senate Armed Services Committee who right now are frustrating the effort that we are putting forward in order to be able to obtain the information and to move forward. I think it is productive that Senator Schumer has engaged on this issue. He's not an insignificant person in this town, but I am concerned about embracing a disclosure paradigm that mirrors the JFK assassination disclosure paradigm. I don't know that there are any Americans who would view the JFK assassination disclosure paradigm as some sort of vaulted standard. Time and again, we've seen that system fail. I also don't believe that, pursuant to the Schumer language, we would have to wait 25 years in order to get this information. 25 years is a long time when you consider what Mr. Burchett said about the lack of veracity that the government has provided to the people up until this point. And so we're here to call for the most inclusive, most robust provisions possible to be included in the NDAA. We don't want to see a lot of log jams created. And in the event that there's any designation of a national security concern regarding disclosure, we believe that this information can no longer be siloed with the entities that have frustrated disclosure. That there should be broader briefings to members of Congress, that the Oversight Committee, which many of my colleagues here serve on, should be receiving those briefings, that the Armed Services Committee should be receiving those briefings, and it should not just be the fiefdom of the Intelligence Committee and the intelligence community. And if we achieve that objective, I think we can start to restore some of the trust the public has. But as we work through the finer points of that legislation, we felt it was important today to come forward and express where the log jams exist, where the opportunities lay before us, and we will pursue those with great vigor. I also wanted to specifically thank House Armed Services Chairman Mike Rogers. He allowed the Burchett Amendment to go on the bill without objection, and I think he is to be commended for that. And also when my colleagues, Ms. Luna and Mr. Burchett and I, were at an Air Force base and were told by Air Force officials that we weren't allowed to see information that whistleblowers had expressed to us existed, it was in fact Chairman Rogers himself who personally engaged with the Office of the Secretary of Defense and gave us the opportunity to view the images that were taken by pilots of some of these unidentified aerial phenomenon. So work to be done, but we hope that this gives you clarity as to what our goals are, how the scope and depth of the mission ahead.
You know, I came to Congress thinking that this place was dysfunctional, and I had a general idea that the bureaucracy would try to block us. But seeing it from the inside, I can tell you it's worse than you can imagine. Everything that you suspect about the federal bureaucracy is doing, they're almost certainly doing. And it's nearly impossible to get a straight answer. So you all know my perspective, but at the end of the day, I think the taxpayers deserve to know where their money is being spent. The question we have before us is that, are we in an environment where the republic is being threatened by individuals and by people who are not elected to be able to withhold information from the public? And so I want to applaud the efforts of this group and the folks standing behind me, especially Mr. Burchett, who, as he said, it's time for transparency. It's time for Tim's amendment to be passed, and as well as the Schumer amendment. While they may not be perfect in their current forms, it gets us in a better direction. And it's my belief that both of them will actually put us in a better place. I don't think that they have to be mutually exclusive. At the end of the day, if we want transparency, we should be going after every avenue that we can to get the information to the American people. Thank you.
Well, again, thank you all. This is about accountability and about transparency. It's about holding the deep state to task for their refusal to declassify information that the American people need to know, that Congress needs to know. In July, I questioned highly decorated naval and intelligence officers who had been in aircraft, who had seen UAPs, and what they told me was alarming. These officers told us, that when encountering these UAPs, had they had to defend themselves or their aircraft or their personnel, they would not have been able to do so. 3 military intelligence officials swore when giving those statements. Foreign objects are buzzing around in our airspace, and Joe Biden's over 30 generals have not only been silent on the issue, but yet have yet to play ball with Congress. Not to mention, American farmers are seeing intelligence aircraft above their fields. There have been 144 reported sightings of these objects that we know of, and the DoD is more concerned about pronouns and woke agendas than informing Congress and having accountability and having transparency. In a moment when American supply chains are broken, Our border is overrun. And Chinese ownership in American institutions has skyrocketed. American defenses against unknown aircraft are paramount. Because of this bipartisan effort in the House and now the Senate, intelligence agencies are now beginning to tout exploratory measures to investigate UAPs. But this needs to be an expeditious process, not 25 years. That's unacceptable. It should be noted that the Kennedy deadline has been blown through a couple of times. The information released has been less than full disclosure. And so whether it's little green men, American technology, or worse, technology from the CCP, we need to know. There needs to be better cooperation amongst agencies, and Congress has a right, an obligation to know. This is about transparency. This is about accountability. The truth is out there, and the American people are ready.
Does anyone have any questions? Yes, sir.
Yeah, so I have two. On the amendment, Congressman, that you have there, it's page and a half. The Senate version of that is 64 pages.
Yeah.
I'm just wondering, are there other things that you're going to be hoping to do that eminent domain thing or whatever, or is that it on your end?
I would like to be, that would be it. I think we've overcomplicated the issue. 64 pages, and Matt alluded to the 25 years. I mean, good gosh, you modeled something after the Kennedy assassination situation, and we're still waiting. Even it just peruse that they allowed a delay of 300 days, and then there's the blanket if it's a national security issue. I mean, so it just, to me, we've got a lot of doors that could be opened, and I think this is I just like a clear, concise way to do it. And I don't need a bunch of lawyers looking over our shoulders telling us, sorry, Jared. And Matt, yeah, sorry, but I mean, the lawyers
We're
are
literally looking over your
yeah, they're literally looking over my shoulders. I just think a simplification is the way to go. Simple answer.
And the second one was just, you made the distinction between the Intel community and the Intel committee. Could you characterize how the Intel committee here is responding to your legislation?
I think I can speak to that just because, we had an NDAA conference meeting yesterday where members of the House and Senate both raised this issue in debate, and the strongest resistance to transparency and disclosure and the Burchett language has come from the House Intelligence Committee. Other questions? Yeah, Ryan.
So, when you raise these concerns about the Intel community being the ones that seems to be the roadblock every time you ask questions, is it your suspicion then that what these phenomenon are more likely to be are intelligence technology as opposed to little green men? Is that what you're trying to figure out or drill down on?
Yeah, I think that the ambiguity there creates frustration among all of us. The fact that we don't know, and of course, if you have an encounter where some of our country's sensitive technology is observed, there has to be a mechanism to ensure that that's not available to our enemies. But that does not justify the multi-decade roadblock that we have encountered. And as you heard from Ms. Luna, when we've got unelected staff members limiting our access to SCIFs and to the types of briefings that we want to receive as elected lawmakers, it really raises questions about whether or not this is really the propriety of some of our intelligence assets or whether it's part of a cover-up. And only when we get the information will we be able to parse that distinction. Griff?
So sticking with the intelligence community, the CIA has reportedly got this secret office, been investigating this for decades. It has recovered some 9 instances of possibly extraterrestrial material. So is the CIA, do you believe they're hiding something? And if so, what is it?
Well, I believe that the recalcitrance from the CIA and from the intelligence community may be animated by some of the cover-up that we have seen up to this point. I hope that's not true, but I'm concerned that it is. And so that's why the Burchett language currently in the NDAA gives us a beachhead to be able to access not only Department of Defense authorities and Department of Defense activities and programs, but we have to actually get into what the CIA has done with UAPs.
But you got to ask yourself, since 1947, they've told us this.
Mike.
Since 1947, basically, they've told us these don't exist. Yet now we're finding out they're spending millions of dollars. NASA has reports on it. The CIA now has reports on it. But yet the Pentagon keeps telling us they don't exist. So again, we're spending a heck of a lot of money to tell people something, to investigate something that doesn't exist.
Yeah, but you're asking the right question, if I can just jump in for a second.
Please.
Because here's, again, what just doesn't make logical sense, right? Is if this is all nonsense, right? Then why are we seeing constant, from different areas of government, whistleblowers coming out with things that are credible? Why, as legislators, are we being stonewalled? Why does it feel like, just as we're making some progress, all of a sudden the ghosts of Christmas past, present, and future come out to talk to staff or legislators that then all of a sudden aren't on board with more disclosure? And I think that's the American people who are following this. That is the same question that you're asking that they're asking. We see the Pentagon not being able to pass an audit for 6 years straight. Grush testified under oath that, part of these programs, these advanced technology programs, are being funded by overfunding programs in some areas of the budget or backdooring money. And so, again, we have been asking these questions, from the financial standpoint and from the transparency standpoint. And it's, Ryan, same question that you had. The intelligence community does not want to share any of this information with Congress. We're asking why. Why? And that it makes it appear that there is a substantial reason why they don't, not an insubstantial reason, right? It's not just maybe it's one of our new toys, right? And so that's, I think, why you see this group pressing so hard.
Yeah, if you go back to the hearing and think about what was said in committee, is that you're seeing this increased activity, yes, near military installation, yes, near conflicts, areas of operation, but you're also seeing it near our nuclear installations. And if you assume for a moment that it's American technology, we have normal areas of operation that we would test new aircraft, right? But it's now conflicting with commercial aircraft. So again, there's got to be an accountability mechanism that if it is our technology, that it's being operated safely, that it's being tested safely. And if it's Chinese technology, then we need to know and ask those questions of, are we ready? What are we doing to counter that? So I don't know if it's Little Green Men or U.S. Technology or the CCP, but they're engaging in around our nuclear facilities. And I don't care who it is or where it's from, that should concern you. There are questions that need to be asked. There are questions that need to be answered, and I'll be damned, we're going to find those answers, and we're going to turn over every stone until we get them.
Let me just follow up a little bit on what Congressman Gaetz, you said about having to fight to get access to see some of the images. So to the best of you can answer this question, have any of you seen something to lead you to believe stronger in the existence of something extraterrestrial,
Well,
not Chinese or otherwise?
Yeah, I am hesitant to make that leap, but what I can tell you is that when Congresswoman Luna and Congressman Burchett and I were at Eglin Air Force Base, and there were hours of frustrations where they didn't want to let us see a photograph taken by a pilot during a test flight. When I saw the photograph, ultimately, thanks to Chairman Rogers weighing in with the Office of the Secretary of Defense, I can tell you it is of nothing that I'm aware of having existing in our arsenal of assets. And I'm on the Armed Services Committee for 7 years. I'm not unfamiliar with the things that we have at our disposal, and it was not something that I could classify as something that we would possess or a capability that any of our adversaries possess, because we also keep pretty close eye on those capabilities as well. So that leaves the question rather open. On that?
In the testimony, there was 13 or 14 documented near misses with our aircraft. So that alone we should ask the question, what's going on? If it's our own people, why are we putting our own people at risk?
Matt?
You don't have these questions answered from what happened at the start of the year, this Bible incident. And you guys often mention China. Why couldn't it be Russia or some other?
Well, yeah,
Russia can't win in Ukraine. They can't.
Yeah, they had this kind of.
Yeah, I don't have a lot of unanswered questions from the Chinese spy balloon incident. I can tell you that our concern about China, particularly in the Gulf of Mexico, emerges from their increased activities in Cuba. And if they are building out more capabilities, and frankly, you see a leveraged buyout of old Russian assets in Cuba being turned over to Chinese control, and so that's what animates our interest in that. Yes, sir.
So my first question is, are we seeing any actual progress towards actual transparency? And second of all, in regards to the UAP Disclosure Act, Congressman Burchett, what kind of changes would you like to see be done here?
First answer is no. The second is I'd just like to see more transparency. That's all I want. You all in the media, that's what we got to have. And it's very difficult for me to go home and talk to people who don't trust the government when the government is telling them something doesn't exist, but is spending millions, if not billions of dollars on researching what doesn't exist.
If I can jump in too real quick, to be clear, I think that Schumer's efforts here are probably the floor as to where we would like to see disclosure begin. So not to say that they're not good efforts. I think basically any step forward is a step forward in the right direction here. But again, going back to just what we have faced, it shouldn't be the case that it is this complicated to release this information. And also just to, put it out there, I mean, it should scare the American people that there is maybe, whether it's special interest or corporation, that thinks that they have a say in what your taxpayer dollars go to and also what information The American people are not stupid. We can handle this information. Other countries have declassified similar information, and it's time that the United States steps up to the plate and does the same.
One aspect of the Schumer amendment that draws a little concern for me is an appointed body that would review information or photographs or what have you before it's released to the public. That is an appointed body that the American public would have no control over. It'd be appointed by a politician. You'd know who'd be on there. You'd have the missile defense companies. You'd have the usual cast of characters. And to me, that casts a chilling effect on the whole thing, in my opinion.
I want to add something that Tim said, because I want to give him some credit. So back to your question of have we seen progress? I mean, listen, it's not like the 118th Congress is doing a lot of things, right? So in fairness, right, I think we're at the same pace. I think because of Tim's efforts and the group behind us, we are actually seeing a lot of progress. First of all, we had a hearing in the House that had never happened before. The Intelligence Committee had a hearing that didn't happen in 50 years. Okay, we've now had multiple press conferences on this. You're having legislation introduced not just in the House but in the Senate. So this has come a long way from the times when Harry Reid was talking about it or Marco Rubio was talking about it. You now have a bipartisan, bicameral effort, and so this place does a lot of things, unfortunately, incrementally, right? It doesn't do big things at the moment. So I got to, Tim is the one who has spearheaded a lot of this, and so, to give him a little more credit that he's willing to give himself, I think we're making a lot of progress. We just have to accept the fact that the pace here in Washington, that we're caught up in that same pace.
Yes, sir.
Now, have you been able to see any documents or videos, etc., that would be considered classified, and follow that if there's a yes there?
Yeah.
Go ahead, Matt.
Yeah, no, I mean, we have.
And so, when you see them, have you said to yourself, there's no way this is a threat to national security? Why is this still being classified?
I have reviewed classified information, and thereafter, wondered to myself, be classified, and so I have had those concerns. I've also, as a member of the Armed Services Committee, seen some radar signatures and other information that even my colleagues who are not on the Armed Services Committee have not been able to see, and that concerns me as well. I think we ought to democratize that information at a minimum throughout the Congress, and I think more productively with the American people. We'll take one more.
And I was just going to say, I've seen stuff by whistleblowers that you would all be scratching your head. Go ahead, last question.
Congressman Gaetz, you mentioned members of the House Intelligence Committee pushed back on this. Did they give you any reason for that? I mean, what are they saying? Can you characterize that?
When, the reaction I've gotten is just sort of a broad brush national security concern. There's not been really an itemized critique of the Burchett amendment to the NDAA. It's been more just a generalized veto from the Senate Armed Services Committee and the House Intelligence Committee, and that's most unfortunate. Great, thank you all so much.
Thank you all.
Thank you.
This one. Thank you.
Are there future hearings, by the way, coming on this? Nothing scheduled?
Not yet, but we'll let you guys know on X.
Okay.